Good evening. My name is Brian Keshen, the CEO of RENA. On behalf of the planning organizations, I'd like to welcome you. The organizations are RENA, Holland Blue Review Kids Rehabilitation Hospital, Community Living Toronto, and the Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence. I'm pleased to welcome you tonight to a provincial election disability forum. This is being hosted at Shara Shemaim Synagogue, and I thank the committee and the board for allowing us to use this space. As a fourth generation settler in Canada, I want to acknowledge the land we are meeting on in this. This is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. It is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I am grateful to call this place my home. It's also my pleasure tonight to welcome party representatives, Dr. Sylvain Roy for the Liberal Party, Nicki Ward for the Green Party, and Monique Taylor for the New Democratic Party. Tonight's moderator is my good friend and my favorite guide. He often directs me where to go and what to see. David Lepofsky. David, if you don't know him, you will now. David is a Canadian lawyer and a disability advocate. Now retired from his position as general counsel in Toronto. David teaches at the University of Toronto at Osgoode Hall Law School. Blind for much of his life, Lepofsky was named one of Canada's most influential lawyers in 2010. He is currently the voluntary chair of the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act Alliance, the AODA Alliance. David, thank you for helping facilitate this forum.
Good evening, everyone. Making sure we're all socially distanced. Get lost, Brian. I will now take my mask off. And as a ground rule for our event tonight, everybody here is to be masked or vaccinated. The candidates are distanced in a way to protect everyone. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. I am a blind individual. I'm one of Ontario's 2.6 million people who now have a disability, but we are the minority of everyone because everyone either has a disability now or gets one later. For people with disabilities, this is the most important election in 2 decades. It is because in 2005, after we campaigned for a decade, the legislature, to its credit, unanimously passed the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. It requires the provincial government to lead our province to become fully accessible to all people with disabilities by 2025. Sadly, while there has been progress, the progress has been too slow, and the next government will be in power in the year 2025 when Ontario misses that deadline. So whoever takes power next has to figure out, now what do we do? How do we make progress, even if we miss that deadline, in order to do the best we can to come as close as possible by 2025, and then take us the rest of the way as quickly thereafter. It is an honor to introduce to invite our candidates to introduce themselves. We have representation tonight from the Ontario Liberal Party, the Green Party, and the New Democratic Party. To their credit, the organizers did a heroic job of working with all the parties. We regret that despite the clear invitation to the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party, they declined to send anyone. I will leave it to the candidates to speak to that conduct in the context of this debate. The candidates will get 3 minutes for an opening statement. They will introduce themselves, and then after they do that, we will be taking questions both from questioners present in the room and those asking questions via the Zoom technology available to us. So over to our candidates. And we are in the sanctuary, so we don't want any unholy behavior whatsoever. We hope we will have a good relationship, positive siblinghood. Take it away. Who are you guys?
Thank you, David. My name is Monique Taylor. I am the NDP candidate for Hamilton Mountain. I would like to thank Community Living Toronto, Holland Bloorview, RENA, and the Canadian Centre for Caregiver Excellence for inviting us here this evening. And of course, a wonderful welcome and thank you to our moderator, David Leprovsky. For the past 11 years at Queen's Park, I have been the critic for children's services, social services, disabilities, and mental health. I've had the privilege of meeting children and adults with disabilities, their parents, caregivers, support staff, doctors, and those who support them with their sports or activities. I've learned of their joys, their abilities, their dreams, but I've also heard their stories of frustration, of a system that is broken, neglectful, extremely underfunded, and at most times forgotten by their government. Assessment processes that are lengthy and invasive, wait times that are frustrating and hurtful to a child's development, an education system that is more about babysitting experience than one of education due to the lack of resources and not enough adults in the room to ensure that their education experience is meaningful. The system of special services at home is daunting and overwhelming, with the horror and the thought of their child turning 18 in just a few short years. And the process will start all over again, as if they have never existed in a system before. And then they have to find their way through the passport system. There are sleepless nights of where their child will live and who will take care of them when they're gone. As parents, they have already spent years of their life worrying, caring, advocating, and fighting a relentless system. They are tired and they deserve better. How does any of this make sense in a province as wealthy as Ontario? How have Liberal and Conservative governments allowed and forced our most vulnerable residents to live in and navigate a system that does not work? This broken system forces those same people into a life of poverty and into living conditions that simply do not make sense. With an NDP government, we will change this, ensuring there's a system that is seamless and services that are needs-based, regardless of a child's needs, age, or diagnosis. Housing that is supportive and reliable, and a workforce that is respected, and a monthly income that is above the poverty line. With Andrew Horvath and our team of dedicated candidates, we have been listening. We are strong and ready to work for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from.
Sylvain, Dr. Roy.
Who are you?
I'm the Liberal candidate for Newmarket Aurora. So good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. Like I said, my name is Dr. Sylvain Roy, and I'm the Ontario Liberal Party candidate for Newmarket and Aurora. I'm so pleased to address you all this evening because I've dedicated my career working as a neuropsychologist with a commitment to serving people with disabilities, those experiencing poverty and homelessness, and those experiencing mental health and addictions challenges. As a matter of fact, my experiences on the front line supporting persons with disabilities prompted me to run for this election. I feel fortunate to have contributed to an innovative program or pilot program that brought health and developmental services, sector agencies, as well as a two level of government together to house and support marginalized individuals with disabilities. Disabilities also has a personal meaning for me. Both my father and my son have a disability. Today, I'm excited to be sharing key aspects of the Ontario Liberal Party platform that will help to support Ontarians living with disabilities, whether it's through accessing more affordable and supportive housing, or through increasing ODSP rates, increasing or improving access to jobs and training opportunities, and improving supports for caregivers and care providers. The Ontario Liberal Party recognizes the critical contributions of persons with disabilities, and we pledge to better recognize those contributions through a variety of policies that will make life better. It is also important to note, as David mentioned earlier, that Ontario will not reach the stated goals of the 2005 Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act by 2025. And it is critical that we collectively renew our commitments to making Ontario accessible as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And our third speaker is?
Nicki Ward.
Go ahead.
Well, firstly, thank you. Thank you for staging this. Thank you for the people joining us online. Thank you for participating in democracy. And it's been well said that for those of us with a disability, this is an incredibly important election. It's a core principle of the Green Party of Ontario, and one of the reasons why I'm proud to be a member, that if we are going to discuss a subject, then we should have lived experience of it. And that is one of the reasons that I've been put forward to speak tonight. I am a person with a disability. It is not overtly visible, but I assure you it is serious and permanent in nature. And if there are any doctors in the house, and perhaps there may be, I'm glad to discuss it with you later. But the fact of the matter is, I am here tonight to not talk about people with disabilities using the language of they and them. I'm here to talk about disability using the language of us and we. And I have had the dubious pleasure of living with a disability under successive governments of all colors except green. I've been under a red government, an orange government, and now under a blue government, and they've all failed people with disabilities disastrously. It's some irony that in addition to having a disability, I have a background in the health insurance sector, working with both private and public health insurers. So I understand the financial issues at stake here. Because the Green Party of Ontario isn't lost outside of reality. One of our core principles is economic sustainability married with environmental sustainability and social sustainability. And without any one of these components, whatever solutions we come up with cannot be sustained. Economic sustainability of our health insurance system in Ontario has to come first. And we believe that regardless of the government that's coming forward, whether it's a coalition between the Greens and some of my colleagues to the left here, in some cases to the extreme left, regardless of whether it's a coalition government or perhaps a government that is led by a blue party, we in the Greens have figured out a way of convincing governing powers to do the right thing. So I'm suggesting that what we offer today is serious, financially responsible, well-considered, solutions based on lived experience. And I'm looking forward to going into that in greater detail.
Thank you very much. A moment on the ground rules. We'll be allowing questions for each question can be up to 1 minute, but no longer. Each party will get 2 minutes to respond. We'll be taking questions that have been sent in via Zoom and also from the room here. We're going to start with my colleague, James Gennaro, sitting up front, who's also going to repeat questions so that they're audible to our Zoom audience. James is going to start by asking a question on behalf of the sponsoring organizations. James is with Community Living Toronto. James, the first question.
Thank you, David. So our first question comes from both Community Living Toronto as well as from RENA. Question is, there are currently 13,000 people waiting for housing in the developmental services system. In parts of the province, that means a 40-year wait for housing. Will your party commit to earmarking housing resources and build at least 2,400 units of new housing?
Can we ask for a response from the Liberal Party first?
Thank you for that important question. As you described, the status quo in this question is simply unacceptable in a province as wealthy and as prosperous as ours. To help more people with developmental disabilities find homes that are suitable for them, the Ontario Liberal Party will commit to building at least 2,500 more supportive housing homes, in addition to increasing funding to support for these homes.
Yes.
Oh. Okay.
Okay. If you could just repeat a little or slowly.
That is perfect.
We're putting you in a difficult situation. You've got time limits, but.
That's fair. It's not loud, so I can speak up some more. The bottom line is we're committing to build 2,500 supportive housing homes for persons with developmental disabilities.
Okay, can we hear next from the Green Party?
Thank you for that. And if I'm not speaking clearly or too quickly, please let me know. Thank you very much. The Green Party of Ontario is committed to what we describe as participatory housing. That means cooperative housing, that means supportive housing, and excuse me, supportive housing. We know that the conditions in which we live affect our general health, well-being and health. One of the things that frustrates me is that proper housing, proper supportive housing for people with disabilities is not only just the right thing to do, it is the economically sensible things to do. It is far cheaper and better and more humane for us to live in houses that support our needs rather than becoming institutionalized. And we're fully committed to that. One of the important parts of what we're doing is reinvigorating cooperative housing. This is a way of immediately revitalizing the housing market across for moderately priced rental income properties around the province. Here in Toronto, the largest landlord is the City of Toronto. And there are properties sitting fallow right now that could be repurposed for co-op housing and indeed for all forms of participatory housing, including supportive housing.
Thank you. And finally, from the New Democrats.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that question, James. You are absolutely correct. For years, we have seen Liberal and Conservative government not pay attention to the needs of our housing backlog crisis, what we can call it, so many things. We are seeing way too many families being left without homes, and people with disabilities are feeling that much more. We are committed to building 100,000 new units of social housing over the next decade. We'll update existing housing portfolio of 260,000, and 600 or 60,000 of those new units will be set aside for people with developmental and physical needs, ensuring that people have homes. We're also committed to ensuring that all new builds are done with universal design to ensure that any home can be reaccommodated to fit a person's physical and changing needs. Thank you.
By the way, for the benefit of the audience, I am arbitrarily and I mean arbitrarily going to decide who speaks in what order, but everyone will get to speak. Our next question will be from our Zoom audience. So Julia, if you could tell us the question, and James will repeat it. And Fred, if you want to be ready with our first question from the audience here present in the room after that one.
Thank you, David. I have the question right here. Thank you, Julia and Michelle, for sending it up. The question is, what will your governments do to clear the Ontario Autism Program waitlist and provide autistic children with support for critical occupational therapies?
All right, we'll turn to the NDP first this time.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak first. I think it's appropriate that I speak on this file first, since I was the critic on this file at Queen's Park for the better of 8 years, close to 9 years, consistently fighting the Liberal government and then the Conservative government, who had needs-based, age-based services for children, where we've seen thousands of children on wait lists for services in the province of Ontario. I believe when I left the file of autism back in 2000, and I think it was 19, 20, 21, around there anyways, the numbers were at 21,000. Now with the Conservative government, we're seeing those numbers at 53,000. New Democrats have always said that we would ensure there was a needs-based, regardless of age or diagnosis, those children would get every service that they needed. Doug Ford said no parent with autism, with a family with autism, would have to protest on the lawns of Queen's Park. Now we have 53,000 kids waiting on wait lists. Liberals and Conservatives have absolutely no credibility on this file, and it is disgraceful what we're seeing with our children. I can speak to my own family. My granddaughter is now turned 3 years old and has been almost diagnosed because she can't even formally get a full assessment of autism. So she is another number on the wait list. When will these governments think that it's the right thing to do to ensure these children's services? It's quite frankly abuse.
We hear from the Green Party next.
Thank you. Is that a little clearer? Is that better? Okay, thank you. one of the things that I appreciate about the Green Party is that we are focused very much on finding solutions wherever we find ourselves in the governmental process, whether in some cases out east, where we have formed part of the government, or elsewhere, as here in Ontario, where we form part of the effective opposition and the moral compass by which many of these decisions are made. It's not helpful to talk in terms of fighting against the Liberals, the Conservatives, or indeed the NDP, because the people in office do care about us, may have different ideas about what's the best way to do things. The fact of the matter is that there is money to provide adequate service for all Ontarians. I should know, I was part of the, in the financial services industry, we helped OHIP with some of their billing back in the old days, back in the 1990s. So there is money available, it's just being badly managed. And going back to this idea of economic, environmental, and social sustainability, if we can present a compelling argument to, let's say, the Liberals or the NDP, or indeed to Doug Ford, then we are capable of moving things in the right direction. We've done it with electric vehicles. We've done it to some degree, a lesser degree, with changing his mind about disability payments. And the same is true for doing things more intelligently and more compassionately for children. And one example that may be a way to work on this is the Exceptional Access Program. I know we're going to be talking about children with disabilities again, so I don't want to go too deep into it. Right now, the Ontario government and the Ontario Health Insurance Program has a, I can't quite see that from my angle, I'm afraid, so you have to hold it up higher. Right now in Ontario, we have a patchwork of reactive systems that have been put in place over successive governments, some of them NDP, some of them Liberals, some of them Conservatives, and they don't work. And so we can present economically sustainable and socially sustainable ideas, and we're not too proud to let other parties steal the ideas so long as they actually implement them.
Thank you. Response from the Liberal Party, please.
Thank you for this. Autism is very personal to me again, because we have a child that's been waiting for 1 full year on a wait list. So I get it. We are committed as a party to evidence-based, needs-based services. There's no doubt in my mind. But when I think about autism, is I see government trying to build a house without a foundation to build to keep the house, the roof, in one piece, hanging overhead. So and when I think about the foundation, I think about services. I think about health services. I think about occupational therapy. I think about psychology. I think about SLP. All these fundamental services are so hard for parents to find and access. You've mentioned diagnostics services. When you have a child who's 3-4 years old exhibiting some behaviors that may not be typical, and we've went through this, and trying to find a doctor, a physician, or a psychologist. Again, our system is so fragmented that parents are grappling at just the diagnostics right now. So we must and we can do better, and linking the healthcare system together to make it happen. But on the other side of things, beyond diagnosis, we need treatment and rehabilitative services to help children, catch up and be able to be successful in schools. And there's so many barriers right now for kids with autism and other kids with disabilities that we need to identify those barriers and provide the supports early, so we have kids that are successful in life. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question, I'm turning to Fred. If you can help us receive a question from a member of our audience here in the room.
My name is Hassan Commander. I am from the Scarborough area, and I am a person with autism spectrum disorder. And my question is, I know the Green Party and the NDP Party all made WWC, but just doubling it to your that, and to me, doubling this terms of investment and we get up to increasing by $9,000. We have a I think I brought this concept up to my local little and created and I tweeted it and did not.
Okay, thank you so much for your question. I'm going to ask James to just repeat it for the benefit of our those watching us at home.
Thank you, David. To summarize, the question is regarding ODSP rates. Would the parties present commit to doubling ODSP rates and then further increasing the rates for ODSP by a further $1,000 in the second year?
Could we hear from the Green Party first?
I have lived, if you call it living, on ODSP. This is not an abstraction for me. I have tried to live on the appalling levels that are so far below poverty. It's absurd. There's not enough money to rent a home. There's not enough money to feed yourself. You have to know where every food bank is so that you can somehow supplement your food so that you can stay as healthy as you can with not enough money to feed yourself. In this time right now, where we have 200% inflation on basic items like food, it's beyond disgraceful that we're in this shape. More than committed to doubling the amount of ODSP, more than bringing people to the poverty line, which is at this stage aspirational for people with disabilities. We are committed to bringing people on ODSP a decent living. And whatever that number is, we're committed to meeting it. Not the bare minimum, but enough to live a healthy, rewarding, full life. I feel passionately about this, and I have really, well, I think I've said my part here. The levels that are proposed by the alternatives of people who haven't lived on it, it's just not adequate in the least. The bare minimum is a number, the low income cutoff, which is far more than doubling it. How are we going to go about doing this? Once again, this is economically sustainable. It's not just the right thing to do. It is economically sustainable because people who can't feed themselves, people who don't have a safe and supported place to live, get sick again. And I can tell you as an insurance executive, that's very, very expensive. Far from a cost. This is an investment in people. This is an investment that will remove costs from our healthcare system. And we have to do it immediately. And we have to convince whoever's in power to move that way.
Thank you very much. Can we hear from the Liberal Party now, please?
Yeah, I've been working with the homeless for many, many years now, and it is.
Just speak a little louder.
I assume that this mic is hot and that people will hear me, but to repeat, I'm a neuropsychologist and I work with folks who are experiencing extreme poverty and homelessness as a profession. This is what I do for a living, and I get that ODSP rates are too low. Our party is committed to raising it 10% for the first year and another 10% the following year, acknowledging that there is much more that can be done. But affordability, I think I see it in more broader context. I think we have to figure out how we can make housing more affordable, transit more affordable, and we need to work towards a goal that's sustainable as well. Now, I don't want to promise, doubling it now because our party has not said that. But that said, we are putting affordability measures in place that will help, and we will continue to work at making life more affordable as the years progress.
New Democrats.
Thank you very much for that question. New Democrats are committed to increasing it 20% overnight the day after the election, and then doubling it within the next year. And then with inflation and a proper formula for years going forward, we'll also change a lot of the punitive rules that we see for people on ODSP. So there's not a double standard when we see to those recipients, and that we're doing it in consultation with people with lived experience. Nothing about me without me. We will ensure that we are fixing the system to take people out of poverty and that they will never be able to go back there again with a formula that makes sense with inflation.
Thank you. Before we go to the next question from the organizers, I'm going to exercise the moderator's prerogative to ask a question myself. The Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act Alliance, which I have the privilege to chair, is a nonpartisan group. We don't campaign for or against any party or any candidate. We campaigned to get strong commitments from all of them. And we've been quite public that each of your parties has responded to our request for commitments, but the Conservative Party is not. Moreover, the Conservative Party has not sent anyone to this debate. Moreover, by the way, I would contrast that to 4 years ago, almost to the day in the last election when Christine Elliott did attend on behalf of the Conservative Party at an all candidates debate on disability issues. Moreover, in a letter I received 4 years ago from Doug Ford, now the Premier, he used the words essentially the effect of, your issues will be close to the hearts of the Conservative caucus, which I leave it to everybody else to compare those words to the turn to candidate part, all of your parties, and say, why should we believe them either? What's your answer? We hear first from the Liberals.
Sure thing. I think the first part is you have to look at the number of candidates who've stepped up in our party that also understand. We have teachers, nurses, psychologists like myself who've decided this time around they need to get involved in the political discourse, and we need to focus on issues that matter, including disabilities, and we need to get it right. Now, if I'm elected, obviously I will bear the legacies of my predecessors in the Liberal Party, and I will acknowledge that there is so much more we could be doing, and I'm personally committed, and myself as a candidate, that I will work hard on those issues moving forward.
NDP.
Thank you for that question. In the last 11 years that I've been at Queen's Park, I have definitely seen neglect when it came from governments who were there. Liberals, Conservatives. It's absolutely shameful that the Conservatives are not with us tonight to be able to speak to their record and to come out with even some type of hope that they could just share a little. But we know that that's not going to happen. I mean, we have literally, when the Conservatives came into government, there was a 3%, measly 3% increase from the Liberals at that time. The Conservatives came in and chopped that to 1.5%. When it came to kids with autism, there was $600 million on the table because Doug Ford doubled that money, but only just over 300 million was spent. This is their track record. They have not put any money into developmental services. We have watched developmental services do more with less on a regular basis, and people continuing to be hurt in the midst of it. We are committed, David, as you know, we've been working for years to ensure that we will commit to the AODA, that we will commit to housing, that we will commit to ensuring that kids and families get services, and that we're committed to bringing people out of poverty.
Thank you. And for the Green Party.
I'm very disappointed by the response of my colleagues on this table. Completely inadequate. The issue is not one of poverty, but one of survival. It's bizarre, it's perverse, it's unacceptable to say, oh, we want to look at the situations, review it. We know people with disabilities on ODSP are not eating right, not living right, and as a consequence are not living long, productive lives. And to use the same percentage rules, we will spend 10% more or 15% more. It's disgraceful. As to why should we believe them? Quite frankly, I don't believe them. And that's why I'm running for the Green Party of Ontario. We, regardless of whether we form the government, which I'll admit is a long shot right now, but whether we form the opposition, which is highly likely, we are good at selling our ideas. We're good at selling our ideas. And I can tell you from my own personal experience in the private health insurance, I worked directly with the Deputy Minister of Health. I worked directly with the Coroner of Ontario. I worked directly with them and negotiated. There is money in there to pay for the things. If there's no money, it doesn't happen. Economic, environmental, and social. We can't get social change unless we can pay for it. And there is money in there. It requires intelligence, articulate, and forceful advocacy. And we are good at doing that in opposition. And that is why you should, and I would say must, elect Green Party candidates in the coming election. Enough of this. The situation we're in right now is a legacy of the mainstream partisan parties who have played this 10%, 15%, a buck a beer, a buck a ride, all of these gimmicks instead of getting down to business and helping Ontarians. It's just, the reason I'm running is because I'm so tired of this partisan nonsense. It gets nowhere. We go one way and then the other way and nothing happens. And people on ODSP, people with disabilities live half lives or die. And that has to stop.
Thank you. Our next,
wish I could respond to that.
thanks.
Good luck.
Let's
Good luck.
hold our
Yeah,
applause
I
till
would-
the
I
end.
would-
I didn't say that
So
before,
much
but
that you
let's,
had to say there, Nikki.
Well,
I
good.
would truly, I
I'm
wish I had the
glad. I'm
opportunity
glad.
because I would agree with so much that you had to say. The
Mhm.
unfortunate part is that we have seen majority governments, and regardless of the situations and the solutions that we put forward, they have refused them.
It's called
So
effective opposition. It's
it's-
all
called
right,
effective
let's,
opposition.
if I may, I'm going to ask if
Thank
we
you.
Can't
can
wait till you get there.
Yeah,
move.
me
to the-
too.
You can add your responses in as you respond to the next question, but I do want to get as many questions in as we can. And thanks for your enthusiasm. James, our next question from the four organizations that convened this all candidates debate.
Thank you, David. The next question is from Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital here in Toronto. The question is, the health of children, especially those with disabilities, has been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. A generation of children and youth is at risk of significant long-term health problems without immediate action. If elected, what will your party do to support children's health care?
Let's start with the NDP, please.
Thank you so much for that very important question. There are many things that we will do within our healthcare system to ensure that kids get the services that they need, because we've definitely seen children suffer throughout this pandemic with their mental health. We will cap them at 30 days. Seeing children wait 18 plus months for mental health services in this province is absolutely disgraceful. We will publicize the backlogs and make sure that we publish the progress reports. We will ensure that we're eliminating the discriminating triage protocols in healthcare so that vulnerable communities are not made further vulnerable with second-class healthcare. We'll increase supports to children's mental health, as I said. We'll launch public inquiries into the government's COVID pandemic response, and we will fully implement Make Kids Count action plan that was laid out by the Children's Health Coalition. There are many things that we can do within our child sector to ensure that children get the services that they need, and not have them waiting for services. As I said earlier, it's pretty much abuse to watch a child who needs services and not able to access those services due to government wait lists and refusal to spend the money that they have sitting in the banks. They have priorities. They're choosing highways over instead of our kids' health. And that's disgraceful and not a way that we would govern in this province.
Thanks very much. Can we hear from the Green Party now?
Thank you for that question, which I understand to be about how we're going to help children with disabilities. I'll give you a good working example of here of things that we've done in the past in the private sector. You can negotiate with these people. Cystic fibrosis is a tragic example of a disability that affects children and affects the lifespan of those children. There are some breakthrough medications that work best on our youngest folks with disability, and they give genuine hope. But because there's such a long lead time, and because the systems are so Byzantine, because they are so layered, actually getting breakthrough medication to treat children is incredibly difficult. Cystic fibrosis is an example that I was talking with a constituent about just recently, and there's a breakthrough drug called Trikafta, which, if given to children earlier on, improves the outlook in their health, their general health, and their life expectancy. In order to apply for it, you have to go through a program called the Exceptional Access Program. And one of the examples, if you are 24 or under with no private health care, you may be eligible for OHIP Plus, unless you're on OW, in which case it's a different process, unless you're on ODSP, in which case it's ODSB, in which case it's a different program, unless you're on Trillium. And going through that maze while you watch your child suffer is expensive and inhumane. This is the kind of thing we need to do, cut through the red tape. And bizarrely, that's an idea that appeals or should appeal to all politicians. How do we use the money that we give government in ways that are effective and humane? Let's look at exceptional access program as a way to immediately get much needed treatment to children with disabilities. I think that's a great way to start.
Thank you. Let's turn to the Liberal Party.
Thank you. And that's an excellent question because as a dad of 3 young kids, it's on my mind all the time. So I worry about this all the time. So when I think about the pandemic and I think about children, I think about virtual schools, I think about mental health, I think about special education and kids with special needs falling behind further and further behind without having the proper supports in place to ensure they were successful in life. And one of the things that I've painfully aware of during this pandemic is that we've seen our entire healthcare system and education system fall apart. The healthcare professionals are not there anymore. They've left the sector, and we need to rebuild to such an extent that it's not even about building a patchwork system, as we have to start all over almost and start going back to our universities and graduate programs to start thinking about all the trained professionals that we need to step up now, because a lot of people have retired during the pandemic and they're just not there anymore. And people have burned out, nurses, psychologists, and the whole gamut. So we have to rethink how we deliver those important services. And it starts with building the foundation. We have to go back and start training a lot of the professionals that we need and think about the workforce requirements and needs moving forward, because right now it falls short. So let's build the foundation. Let's invest in training more professionals, recruiting more professionals that may be around, and think through about the needs and really plan for those needs, because ultimately that it's balloon out of control and we have to think it through. So building that, to me, that means training and recruiting more psychologists, social workers, and in the education sector, special ed supports need to be there. So absolutely rebuild the workforce and work with schools and educators and so on to make sure that those services are available.
All right. Could we have our next question from our Zoom watching audience?
Thank you, David. Let me get that question teed up here. You didn't warn me, David.
Of course.
Okay, question from our Zoom audience at home. To all the candidates, what are you doing to make your campaigns accessible to constituents?
All right, let's ask the Liberal Party first.
I smile because one of my volunteers, the first thing he did when we got in office is he built a ramp out of, I don't know where he got the materials, but when we sent emails, we made sure that it's not only physically accessible, but we wanted to make sure the bathrooms and so on, everything is set up in such a way that we could welcome anybody in the office to come and have a conversation with me. And I walk in the next morning and this beautiful ramp is built out of materials. I don't know where he got it from. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. So ultimately, we've sent the message out to our volunteers that we want to make this fully accessible in every possible way we think about. And the first part, there was the physical accessibility, and that's what our campaign did the first time around.
All right, thank you. NDP.
Thank you for that question. So while looking for my campaign office, that was the #1 rule, is that it had to be accessible for entrance, for ramps, for the bathroom, for people to be able to navigate around the office. And that's exactly what it is, and something that I'm really proud of, and always ensure that accessibility is first on mind.
And the Greens.
Nothing about us without us. Thank you for that quote. Accessibility means much more than ramps. It means making sure that we provide equity from the beginning. And our party started with that by actively recruiting equity-seeking candidates like myself. Went out of our way to attract people with special needs from different backgrounds, different experiences, and to give folks who may be living in poverty money to help them run as candidates in the first place. It's hard coded into the DNA of our party to be inclusive in every sense of the word. You shouldn't have to build a ramp. Where your office is should be accessible. It shouldn't need to modification to be accessible. It should be built to be accessible. It's a whole philosophy. And the same is true going backward to supportive housing. We shouldn't have to need, in some cases, there are special needs for special support, but the fact of the matter is, doors should be wide enough to accommodate wheelchairs all the time, everywhere. That should be hard coded into our process. Bathrooms should be large enough for a wheelchair to make a full circle, not because of a special need to somehow separate somebody with a disability from the rest of society, but because it's the right way to build a bathroom. Back to how we're making our campaign accessible. We're not spending our money on a fancy office. We're spending it on going out, reaching people where they live, providing ASL services and other language and other assistance services so that everybody can participate in this democracy of ours. Not just people who are members of the Green Party, but everybody, so that everybody gets a chance to vote, participate, and be heard at Queen's Park.
Okay, thank you. Fred, can we have our next question from folks present in the room here?
My name is Isabel. One thing food banks do not help people on disabilities and most vulnerable. You don't help those with IBS, you do not help those with Crohn's, you do not help those with celiac, you do not help those with diabetes. All that is a myth that they are the most vulnerable. I'm going to call that. It's nice that not just the children and that they support until they're 18, but after they're 18, many end up in the shelter, and that's not. When you're talking about nothing for us or us, I've been fighting for 4 years. The only reason anybody's been talking about 100% increase is because of me. Have I been included in any debates anywhere on TVO or CTV or anywhere else? No. Are my ideas not valid? No. Why not? Because I'm trans and I'm disabled and I'm poor. So here's my question. Instead of always playing with housing game, because 50 years of talking about affordable housing has led to more homelessness than ever and more people struggling, and it's just a smoke screen of parking. Why are not all the provincial parties getting together and trying to get other provincial parties to demand that the federal government, instead of building, people want to build 100,000 units or whatever, and you're maybe coming up with 40,000 units, start demanding that the federal government build 10,000 50-story apartment buildings, average market rent for rental buildings. There's 1.3 million empty homes in Canada right now. So you're talking about wanting to build a housing that's not going to be affordable to anybody, it's many empty homes like Toronto. So, you just wasted resources.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to wrap up. I'm going to ask you to wrap up with a question just so we can move along.
That's a fair idea to advocate that the federal government legislate constitutionally that the average market rent be guaranteed to every Canadian citizen, so that average market rent buildings will get built. So when the buildings know that people can actually afford to move into them, they'll build them.
Okay.
Of course, they know that people will get,
You know what? I'm sorry. I'm gonna interrupt. I'm gonna interrupt because you've got a whole
they say need not apply. Why is that? Because they know when the audience people are ready to try to ask for a whole check for paying the rent, you gotta do something shady to get by. Only 12% of disabled people live in subsidized housing. Only 12%, 88% do not live in subsidized housing.
Okay, what
There's a lot of people in housing. We need the building will change so that the housing is soundproof. Because people are getting driven out of their units. People have mental health issues, can't get sleep at night, they sleep deprivation, torture, act out, they keep out of their unit, and then they go into shelter for the rest of their life. Somebody 25 years old wants to spend the rest of their life in shelter. We need supportive housing, more of it, so that people that are homeless and in shelter should get 2 years of supportive housing to get their issues and addictions dealt with, mental health issues, and so that they can get a place to have them training and whatever.
okay.
We need reality.
Okay, you know what? I'm gonna I'm gonna summarize.
That would be better.
I'm gonna,
Instead of all these provincial, affordable housing.
Okay.
You know, mostly congestion, you're not allocating to other towns on board, they didn't have the federal government.
All right.
Built 10,000 50-story average market rental apartments across that.
okay.
Thank you.
Really do that.
All right, I'm going to put the question to the candidates. Let me also say that your anger, your frustration, and your sense of eagerly wanting to be heard, I think are as important as the particular specific policy options that you're putting to the candidates. Because there's limited time, I'm going to ask you, could you just talk each to at least one of the ideas that was presented as a solution, but could you also talk to the sense of frustration and anger that we've heard echoed here, and that I must say, I hear from people in my community organizing activity all the time. Can we start with the NDP, please?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Isabella. We hear you. I hear you. I hear your frustration and I understand your frustration. I talk to many people in my community also who are very frustrated with the lack of housing, with the lack of proper supports and resources. And we can do those things. We just have to think differently. We have to be looking at tiny home communities. I mean, there are projects where, but hold on, there's different. So Isabella,
Okay.
I want to have the opportunity to answer you. But in the meantime, Isabella, we have to be able to work together to find solutions for today. We can't wait until all of these large apartment buildings are built. We have to look at ways of doing things that are creative and can be done very quickly. We have way too many people living in tents in our parks, in our escarpment, and it's answering her frustration. The frustration is that there is not enough homes. She wants to build large homes or large apartment buildings in conjunction with the federal government. That does not happen overnight. We need immediate solutions to bridge us, to get through. There will always be a need. There will always be a need
Okay.
for transitional homes.
I'm gonna,
And that was my point. Transitional homes, until we can get people in sustainable homes that they can call home and stay in forever.
okay. Let me now turn to the Greens for the second response.
Okay, it is, firstly, not only do I hear you, I'm actually listening to what you're saying, which some of the other people are not. I heard you say that you are frustrated by folks aging out of the system, to use a technical term, that someone with autism ceases to be supported after age 18. I heard you say that you are frustrated with being rendered invisible and unheard by people who would further marginalize you, perhaps trot people like us with a disability out when it's time for an election or a time to fundraise and do nothing. I hear your frustration. I'm listening to your frustration when you say that there are resources right now that are not being used, that are sitting there empty. There are homes right now that could be used and are being empty because they're being speculated upon. I hear you. I genuinely hear you. And like you, I am absolutely maddened by the same old gobbledygook. I'll think of another different word, but a gobbledygook will do, that is trotted out. It is not just the government, the standing government's job to make these changes. It is the job of the opposition to oppose, clearly, not merely demonize the government, but actually figure out solutions with the resources that we have on hand. I hear you when you say that food banks, it's atrocious that we have to rely on food banks for basic nutrition. Let me finish. Let me finish, Isabella. Please, Isabella, I want to hear. Please, I want to hear what the Liberals' response to this is too. So
Okay,
please, let me finish on, no, please. I have been
ahead,
interrupted.
go
I'm going to finish on one more point that I
Go
heard
ahead,
brought up
go
that
ahead.
needs to be addressed. Food banks do not deal with people who have irritable bowel syndrome. It does not provide nutritious food. It does not help people who have diabetes. It does not help. These are not solutions. And I hear you on all of those points that you raise, and I hear your frustration, and I really, really, really want to hear what the Liberals have to say about this.
And by coincidence, let's hear from the Liberal Party.
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to say is I did hear you as well. And I thank you, both of my colleagues' response here as well. I see this every day. I work at Seton House. I work at the Women's Place, Women's Residence in Toronto. I work with homeless people who've lost everything and are struggling, they're struggling to make ends meet. And for the past 8 years now, we've been working with the community, with women, men, trans people across the board to try to find solutions. One of the things. Can you repeat that?
No, just
I didn't hear the question, but we've been collaborating and finding innovative ways to help bring people out of the community. And this, I'm speaking right now, I'm putting my hat as a clinician on before I'll put my Liberal Party hat. But we've found innovative ways to help people leave the shelters, find homes. It might have been through rent supplements with the City of Toronto, for example. It might have been with special programs with ODSP and so on. But I found when we start working as a community, and the example I pulled early on included different organizations, different agencies, 2 levels of government coming together and trying to come around, and the question was around developmental disabilities and shelter system, and we managed it, and we've managed to save lives as well, because one of the things that happen when you're homeless is you might have physical disabilities or physical issues as well. And you're right to be upset and you're right to be angry. And a lot of the clients, a lot of people I work with are angry every day, and I hear you. And this is why I'm running. This is the reason I'm running today. I am not happy with prior policies, prior government stance on this, and I am here to advocate to change the system. I am here to make it clear, crystal clear, that we need more funding, more supports, more housing across the board. There's not a one-size-fit-all solution to housing, but I am committed to the issue.
All right, I'm going to ask if James Gennaro can just read the final question that's going to come from the organizations who were pulled together this event for us.
Thank you, David. So our last question is from the Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence. Question is, StatsCan says that half of all Canadians will be caregivers at some point in their lives. Caregivers and care providers are the backbone of the care economy. What will your party do to support caregivers, unpaid, and care providers, paid, in their necessary work?
We're going to start with the Green Party, please.
I think I started. Oh, okay.
Or did you start the last one?
Oh, I was in the middle. I prefer to go
That's
last. on
okay.
this one.
I can't keep track
That's
either.
all righty.
I think I went first last time.
I think
It's
so.
okay.
Does that mean I go first?
Go ahead.
All right, I'll go first.
All right.
And thank you for redirecting this, but no, it's interesting because the past 2 years is that for me or no? Okay.
No, you go ahead.
All right. The question is really interesting because I've experienced this from both ends. My dad has advanced stages dementia, and we had to figure out what we're going to do to both my family, my sister and I, to provide the care, but also at the same time, how do we get caregivers to help in areas that we have no competencies ourselves, my sister and I. And this is all during COVID. We've seen the system collapse. My mother got so ill at one point that we had also had to consider putting my dad in long-term care, which was a horrible experiences. So I've spent time helping my dad in a shower, all these things that I wasn't used to. And it was painful. It was hard to see my father degrade to such a level. And on the other side, I felt the system crumble around us. So we didn't have nurses and PSWs coming in the home. So I saw it from both ends. And this is why I think our commitment in terms of helping to rebuild that system, like, I mean, let it be clear, the home care and long-term care system has collapsed in front of us, and we have to start thinking about rebuilding the workforce, and that entails fair wages for folks who are working on the front lines. So scrapping, for example, Bill 124, which is a horrible policy, by the way. But beyond that, we have to start thinking about the roles caregivers will have non-paid, non-paid ones, or like family members and so on. And we have to start thinking about what is the workforce going to look like. And with an aging population in front of us, it's critical now that we act and we invest in this area. Thank you.
All right, let's go to the green second.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Certainly. I'll just get you the punchline of the question.
No, I don't think.
What will your party do to support caregivers, unpaid, and care providers, paid, in their necessary work?
Okay. Once again, I keep on harping on this about economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and social sustainability. I worry about this. My mother is 84, and I pray that I won't be the caregiver for her, but I also have a disability, and I pray that she's not the caregiver for me. Know from lived experience that caregivers themselves become sicker. And there is a cost in terms of human suffering, and a cost in terms of society, and a cost in terms of the economy. And once again, the fact that we failed to make the sensible decisions, the right-minded decisions, the economically sustainable decisions that are also good for our society is frustrating to me. I lived experience, again, I worked with the Deputy Minister of Health directly, negotiated with OHIP and other health insurance plans across Canada. And by the way, haven't even begun to talk about the Ontario Health Act, or the fact that it is unlawful to discriminate against people with disabilities, and yet it happens every day, and how we need to hold government to account for that. Caregivers are the best investment we can make, whether they are paid or unpaid. They should be paid, if that makes any sense. If a family member is helping out, there should be financial support for that. It's not spending money, it's investing money, because as long as we are helping our family members, we are keeping them out of very, 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 very expensive institutionalized care. Personal support workers need to be treated as the professionals they are, not as gig workers in a gig economy, just basically interchangeable units. Personal support workers save lives every day. And while they are saving lives and improving the quality of life for people, they are also saving the province of Ontario money. And it's enormously frustrating to hear the same tired old tropes being trotted out instead of negotiating with whatever government we have and bringing sustainable solutions to the table. And that's why I'm running as a Green.
Okay, can we hear from the NDP, please?
Thank you very much for this question. And it's something that I've been dealing with for years. Hearing about the lack of PSWs, the lack of supports that families were seeing in their homes, that families were expecting to show up and nobody showed up. This is something that's been going on for quite some time. And this happens when we have a privatized system, making sure that we have a fully public system that ensures good wages, pensions, that take care of and respects the workers who are working so hard on behalf of our loved ones. We're committed to a $5 raise for PSWs. We're also committed to ensuring that we're attracting and retaining those same workers and taking care of our loved ones at home so that we do not see what happened throughout the pandemic happen again. Most importantly, we are committed to keeping seniors safe in their homes. That is something that can be done by ensuring that we're helping with nursing care, helping with food preparation, helping with medications. They're important pieces of the system that need to be that need to be attended to. Also, for a care benefit program for family members who are staying home to help their family members, we're committed to $400 a month to helping those caregivers be able to help their loved ones. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to, folks, we're now at the time for our program to conclude. And so I just want to offer a couple of concluding very brief remarks. One is to thank the candidates for their time and their passion, and their parties for agreeing to send them here to debate our concerns. I'd like to thank the 4 organizations, community organizations, who did all the heavy lifting to bring this organization, this event together. I want to thank Shari Shemaim Synagogue for making its its building available to us. Let me just speak to all of you here and at home for just one moment. In the spirit of nonpartisan, please vote. Please take action now to contact Elections Ontario to find out what you need to do to vote. For example, you have the option of mail-in ballots, but you've got to move very quickly to do that. And mail-in ballots, which by the way have significant accessibility problems for blind people like me, are one way to be sure that you don't have to get exposed to other people in close proximity at a polling station during a pandemic. The other thing I encourage every one of you to do is to use the power of social media, use the power of your phone if you have access to one. Call into radio programs and raise disability issues. Tweet to the Queen's Park journalists who cover this election and who, I regret, often fail to include us in the issues they tell us we care about. We do care about our issues. They need to pay attention to us too. Thank you all very much for coming, and everybody have a safe trip home. Thank you.